When you think of the greatest investors of all time, Warren Buffett's name is probably right at the top. But his legendary results didn't just come from luck. They came from a really clear set of principles. In this explainer, we're going to unpack his 6 core rules for investing. So, just how powerful is his strategy? Get this, if you had invested just $1,000 in his company, Berkshire Hathaway, way back when he first took it over, you would have over $21 million today. Yeah, you heard that right. Not a typo. $21 million. And here's how he pulled that off year after year. For decades, Buffett has averaged a whopping 20% annual return. Now, to put that into perspective, that consistently doubles the S&P 500's average of 10%. This isn't about getting lucky once or twice. We're talking about a long-term philosophy that just wins. So, what's the secret sauce? All right, here's our game plan. We'll start with the mindset behind that incredible $21 million result. Then we'll dive into what to own, how to choose your investments, how to act when you see an opportunity, and finally, what Buffett considers your ultimate, most important asset. Okay, first up, let's get into the mindset behind these kinds of results. It's not just about picking stocks, It's a whole philosophy for turning what starts as a small bet into an absolute fortune. So that leads us right into our next big topic, which covers Buffett's first 2 rules. And it all boils down to one pretty simple question. What should you actually own? And this brings us to rule number 1, and honestly, this one catches a lot of people off guard. Holding on to a bunch of surplus cash is a huge mistake. Buffett says cash is like oxygen. You need some to survive, for sure, but hoarding extra tanks doesn't actually do you any good. Why? Well, because that idle cash isn't out there working for you. It produces nothing. And Buffett himself nails the reason why. Inflation is a fact of life, which means your cash is pretty much guaranteed to lose its purchasing power over time. As he says, the dollar will be worth less. Maybe not worthless, but the trend is definitely down. So if cash is a no-go, then what's the alternative? Well, that leads us straight to rule number 2. Instead of holding an asset that's just melting away in value, you want to own assets that are productive, things that actually create value over time. Buffett has this fantastic analogy to make this crystal clear. Imagine you owned all the gold in the world, a giant shiny cube. What does it do? Nothing. It just sits there. Its only value comes from the hope that some other person will pay you more for it down the road. Now contrast that with a working farm. You buy a farm because you expect it to deliver crops year after year. That is a productive asset, and that's the kind of investment Buffett loves. Okay, so we want productive assets. Simple enough, right? But, there are thousands of them out there. How on earth do you pick the right ones? That's what this next section is all about, the mental models you need to make smart decisions. Now, rule number 3 is probably his most famous piece of advice, and for good reason. It's all about staying inside your circle of competence. In other words, you have to know what you know, and maybe even more importantly, you have to be really honest about what you don't know. So what is this circle of competence? Just think of it as the industries and businesses that you genuinely, truly understand. And here's the key. It's not about how big your circle is, it's about knowing exactly where the edges, the perimeter are. You don't have to be an expert in everything. Buffett loves to quote the founder of IBM, Tom Watson Sr., who just put it so perfectly. I'm no genius, but I'm smart in spots, and I stay around those spots. That's the whole idea. Find your spots and just stay there. All right, rule number 4. This one is all about discipline. So once you find a company that's smack in the middle of your circle of competence, you have to do something that's really hard. You have to evaluate the business itself before you ever look at its stock price. Because the second you look at that price, it's going to bias your judgment of what the company's actually worth. It just will. So here's his playbook, step by step. He'll read a company's annual report to understand the business inside and out. Then, and this is crucial, he'll calculate what he believes the entire company is worth. Only after he has that number in his head does he finally look at the market price. And if the price is way, way below his calculated value, that's when he buys. He actually did this with PetroChina, valuing it at about $100 billion when the market was only selling it for $35 billion. That's a huge discount. Okay, so you've done the hard work. You found a great business, it's in your circle, and it's selling at a fantastic price. So now what? Well, getting the analysis right is only half the battle. This next part is all about having the right mindset to actually seize the opportunity. And that brings us to rule number 5. When a truly great opportunity comes along, you have to swing for the fences. You have to act decisively. Making a bunch of tiny, timid bets won't change your financial future. I mean, listen to how Buffett puts it himself. Real game-changing chances are rare. So when one appears, you have to be ready to go big. But how do you develop the patience to wait for those moments? Well, he's got another great analogy for this, the 20-punch card. Imagine you have a card with only 20 punches on it for your entire investing life. Every time you make an investment, you use one punch. This forces you to think incredibly hard about every single decision and to only act on your absolute best ideas. It completely stops you from just thoughtlessly dabbling. We've covered what to buy, how to choose, and how to act. But Buffett's 6th and final rule. This one is arguably the most powerful of all, because it's about the single most important investment you will ever make. Think about it for a second. What is the one asset that can't be taken away by taxes or recessions or even inflation? The answer is you. The ultimate investment is always in yourself. Your own talent is your greatest protection. Improving your skills, especially something like communication, can increase your lifetime earning value by 50% or even more. And unlike a stock, that value can never be taken away from you. So study the habits of people you admire and actively work to develop those same traits in yourself. That, right there, is rule number 6. And that really brings us full circle. Following Buffett's rules for the market is incredibly powerful for sure, but his final lesson is the most profound one. So the real question to leave you with is this: what's the first step you'll take to invest in your ultimate asset?